I'm Brad King, and this is Stories in Steel. On this episode of Stories in Steel, we sit down with, well, me. After being bugged or ridiculed, depending on who you ask, on more than one occasion to tell my story, we figured it was only fair to show you how much of a glutton for punishment I truly am. So keep your hands inside the ride, boys and girls, because it only gets weirder from here. Waiting. Hey, sorry, I'm late. I'm me. Took you long enough to get here. I don't know what that was all about. This is a little weird, but all right, let's do this. What got you into doing what you do? What's the deal? How did you become who you are here? Wow, the very beginning. Cars have always been a huge part of my life. I've always been a car nut. That is just me. As long as I can remember, my father brought home Hot Rod magazine. That was like a huge part of my life. Every month he'd bring home Hot Rod magazine, and I couldn't wait to see it. But Dad was also an influence, just from a different angle. He was a big truck guy, and so that was kind of what inspired me with the shiny and the polish and all that, because that's what I grew up with. But the magazines were everything. That was kind of my world. So yeah, cars were everything from the very beginning. Was there anybody that was doing art in your family, or where did this come from? And there's always kind of somebody. Was there somebody that you were around that had the gift? Wow. Yeah, nobody in my family. My grandfather on my mom's side was. He'd worked with a sign guy, and he had done some screen printing when he was younger, and done a little bit of creative stuff. But that's the only part of the family I can, because my parents, neither one of my parents were whacked like me. They were pretty much straightforward, and that was that. They were focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's what they did. And I was the weird one that came along, and they didn't know what to do with me. I mean, did you have anybody to follow, or were you just kind of on your own? Yeah, I had nobody to follow. I mean, I had no influencers as far as what I saw. I read a lot when I was a kid. I was always in the library. I was that library nerd. But I read. I mean, I still do. That's still a huge part of my world, is learning and reading and studying and trying to figure out new things. And I didn't get to take any type of art stuff until I was in probably 8th grade, and it was a private school, and we had a little bit of art, but it wasn't much. It wasn't until I moved away there and went to public school, and it was like, there's actually art, and that was huge, and it's so funny because my 8th grade art teacher was my art teacher in high school. He just kind of followed me, or I followed him, and Mr. Pickens, and he was great, and he pushed me. He made me work at what I wanted to do. It sounds like you're kind of goal oriented. Is that if you're reading and you're studying, obviously there's an end game with this. Being goal oriented was always me. That's how I've always taken on everything. I would go after something that I thought was completely unattainable. Somebody said, "You're never going to do that," and it was game on. That was all I needed. Somebody to tell me that it couldn't be done, or you're going to figure that out. Right. And I'm going to go do it, because that's just who I am, and I've done that since I was a little kid. When did you decide you wanted to be a pinstriper? How old were you? Obviously you were reading magazines at a young age. That obviously rubbed you the wrong way, the right way, whatever it was, you were rubbed. So when did you decide to pick up a brush? How old were you when you started doing that? I was probably 10 the first time I started messing with 10 or 11 years old. I was really young, and I'd seen an article in Hot Rod magazine about the infamous Von Dutch, And it was just him showing, how he pulled lines. And it wasn't, it showed a little bit of the decor of what he did, but it was just, this is how I pull a line. So it was just a drawing. I don't even know who drew it up. It might have been some photos, but it seemed like it was some drawings of what he was trying to do. And I went, okay, I have to figure this out. So I don't even know what I had for my first brush. I think I ended up buying my first brush when I was like 12, a striping brush, and it was like typical classic Drumbacher, and I killed it. It lasted about a year, and my parents, well, Dad especially, Dad let me do what I wanted to do. He didn't tell me, no, you can't do it. So we had a country square station wagon. And I was determined to pinstripe this. I'm seeing it in the magazines. I'm going to do this. So I was probably 11, and he had some pinstriping tape. And I remember taking the tape, and I used that as layout tape because I didn't know any better. So I took it and I pinstriped him some designs. So he had tape on each side. So you had this little 1/8-inch line down the middle. So I ran it, did my little design around the hood emblem. And then around the back where the window went down, and I mixed up some white enamel, whatever. Who knows what it was for? I couldn't even tell you. And I mopped it in between the tape, and I peeled the tape off, and it had this white design on the front and the back of the car. I mean, I was ruined, and they were gracious enough to let me destroy all of their vehicles. I flamed my dad's truck his pickup when I was 15, and I repainted it when I was 17, and I did paint work on the Bronco and airbrush murals on everything. I mean, I had my hands in everything. That was my world. And then in high school, I had guys I went to school with let me paint their stuff, and I flamed the guy George's little car when I was a junior in high school, and painted another guy, Terry's car, when I was a junior. So I was busy throughout high school. I wasn't making a lot of money because I was trying to master painting. So, guys were boxing groceries, doing things. I wasn't doing that because I was trying to figure out how to paint. That was a big deal for me. I needed to learn the basics of painting. And I sucked at it because, again, I had nobody to teach me. I was kind of on my own. I found a body shop in town, and I would watch through the window, watch the guy work. And finally, he's like, "What are you doing? Why don't you come in here and help me out?" And so he showed me a little bit, and by then I was totally ruined. Graduated high school and went to work for the Chevy dealership. The guy that ran the shop, he'd see me painting around town. He goes, "Hey, why don't you come to work for me? I'll show you what you don't know, and at least let's get this ball rolling because I need a painter." The dealership I was working at was in a town called Baker City, Oregon, and we moved up there from Southern California when I was in the eighth grade. So we left when I was in private school, went to public school. We moved up there, and I finished, went to high school up there, and that's where I worked for a year before I moved back to California. And decided you were going to chase your dream. What did you do? How did that happen? I mean, how do you go to California and just what did you do? What did you start with when you moved back? And it wasn't until I got down to California that I became friends with a guy, and I learned how to make stuff straight. This is how you block it up. This is how you prep this, and so I took my knowledge of what little I had, so I was able to learn how to paint. And in the meantime, I was still messing around with pinstriping and lettering. I had been doing that when I was up in Oregon, and but there was way more stuff down here. All of a sudden, there's dune buggies and pickups and trucks and there was like everything that didn't exist in Oregon. Oregon was, everybody was hunting and fishing, and it's only a handful of car guys, and I moved back down here and I found my people. I had my hands. I was trying to do everything. I was trying to pinstripe. So I was working at a couple of BMW dealerships and Ford dealerships, just pinstriping cars, just pulling lines. And because I knew that was important. It wasn't until I was like 21 until I actually saw somebody do it. I'd been doing it for years. And until I actually saw somebody else like, oh, so that's what it's like. I truly had never seen it done before. I was painting race car pieces at a friend of mine, Tom, and he was doing a lot of indie light type stuff, Formula Atlantics and Super V's, and I was painting those kind of race cars and pinstriping and lettering those up, and in '85 I got invited to a striping party down in Fullerton. It's like, you need to come down here. A guy named Little Louie invited. He was a pinstriper down in San Bernardino, and his mom sold brushes, so I would buy my brushes there. And he still is beyond good. He was the guy I wanted to emulate. I mean, as far as mastering the fine lines, there was guys, backtrack here a little bit, when I was in Oregon, reading magazines, and then even seeing somebody up out of Portland, there was 3 guys that they really got my fire going. One guy was Phil Whetstone, and he had painted a funny car, airbrushed a stereo inside of the thing, and had speakers. Like, I want to do what this guy's doing. This is great. Steve Stanford, who everybody knows, but most people didn't know that he was a pinstriping lettering guy. They knew him as an artist, but they didn't know that he was a phenomenal lettering guy. Great style, very, very artistic. And then Mitch Kim out of Portland. And being that I lived in Eastern Oregon, I'd go to hot rod runs or whatever, and it's like, who's this Mitch guy? This stuff is incredible. Little tiny lines, very, very intricate. And it's like these guys are people that I definitely want to emulate. And not knowing that, fast forward, they're just friends of mine. So I go to the striping party, and it was a madhouse. It was a big deal. It ended up becoming the Moon Ice thing, and it kind of just went nuts down the road. But at the beginning, it was just a bunch of pinstripers that showed up, and there was probably 100 guys or so that showed up there. And I'm like 22. I think I'm 22. And I see Ed Roth. And of course, Ed Roth was larger than life in the custom world of building car. Building wasn't really my type of stuff, but building custom cars. He was definitely that guy. And so I walked up and started talking to him, introduced myself, and asked him some questions, and he just talked to me. He just treated me like anybody else, very respectful, and I tried not to be the fanboy, so I wasn't like, oh God, I'm talking to Ed Roth. It was just like, wow, I'm talking to Ed Roth, but I gotta be cool, because I gotta be cool, I'm talking to Ed Roth. And we're just talking. And I'm looking around the room, and he's like, have you met Dutch? And I go, no. You want to? Okay. So we get up and we walk over, and it was a little surreal having Von Dutch be introduced by Ed Roth. So I got Ed Roth, I got this real tall guy on one side, little short guy on the other, and I'm this punk kid in the middle going, okay. a little overwhelming, I bet. And I realized this is definitely not you're not in Kansas anymore. It's like, I am truly with my people. I mean, I'm with my people. This is what I want to do. You went to Vegas for a while. We know this about you. And a little short run. What brought that on? Why did you go to Vegas? I went to Vegas. This was obviously before the party. It was in '84 when I went there, and actually it was like the end of '83. I went over to go just check on some work over there because there was so much going on in Southern California. I thought maybe because there was already so many pinstripers, there was already so many guys doing what I did. I went, maybe I would be better off checking, just see what's over there. See what's over in the car world. I'd gone cruising over there. I'd been to hot rod events over there, and it was a lot of cars. And I ended up staying over there for a few months, did some worked at a Corvette shop called Barney's Corvettes. And I was helping paint, I was pinstriping. And I was just a kid. I mean, I think I was 20. But I had my hands in it, so I was somewhat knowledgeable enough to get myself in trouble. And I was working on this one car, and Ted goes, "This is gonna be on the cover of a magazine." Really? I go, yeah. And he took a bunch of pictures of me painting a car. And this was kind of weird because I had a goal. It's like, I want to be on the cover of a magazine doing something by the time I'm 30. The picture was taken on my 21st birthday. So most people are getting drunk, legitly for the first time. I was in a paint booth at 2 o'clock in the morning pretending to paint a car, which was way cooler than drinking. So, and I'd had other magazine stuff pop up. I'd said some big rig magazines, some pinstriping I'd done on trucks on the covers of a couple different magazines. So that was my goal. I wanted covers. It was never about, did you get stuff inside? Yeah, I've had stuff inside, but I didn't care about inside. I wanted covers. So that was my first cover, and that was pretty amazing. Why did you leave Vegas? It just didn't work out. It wasn't what you were planning on doing. I mean, obviously Vegas is not Southern California, so what made you come back to California? I came back because it wasn't what I wanted, and I was painting everything I could find. So that's when I was doing some of the Atlantic cars and working on that stuff. And I'm driving through town one day, and some guy goes by the other direction in a 46 Ford convertible, a red one, and it was a cool car. So me being me, I did a U-turn, and I chased him down. And he pulled into a Circle K parking lot. And I pulled up. It's like, I got to check this car out. Totally cool guy. I introduced myself to him, and he introduced himself to me. And I'm Bob Bowder. And that was the guy that really made my career kind of take off. There's always that one person that kind of points the direction your life goes. And was Bob your guy? Is that how that went? So meeting Bob was huge. There's always that one person that kind of points your life in the direction it goes. And Bob was my guy. I didn't know it at the time. He was just this guy that I thought was really cool. And he goes, come up the mountain. He looked up in Crestline. I was in the high desert. He goes, come up on the mountain. I want you to do some things. I'm like, okay. So I went up there and did a couple jobs for him. And we hit it off. I mean, he was totally cool to me, very respectful, always treated me with respect, which was, here's this guy that's kind of larger than life in the hot rod world. And he had just finished doing this 40 Ford, this iconic 40 Ford for Jerry Moreland. And it hadn't come out in the magazines yet, and it's like, well, this is a pretty cool car. And his best friend was this guy named Boyd Coddington. And I'd seen some stuff in the magazines. I'd seen a couple of his cars at shows. I'd seen one that's still my favorite car that he'd ever built, this Phaeton. And that was part of his group. He ran around with this group of guys that just built these amazing cars. And he had his hand, whether he was helping or he was just doing his own thing, that's what he did. And so he introduced me to people. I met Pete Shaporis because Pete lived across the street before he started SoCal up. And Mike Harper building Holden Chalks was across the street from that. So there was 3 guys like in the neighborhood, and there's all these hot rods that are going on. Just nothing but hot rods up on this mountain. And it was the coolest thing ever. And I worked on some really, really cool projects. I striped some Harleys for Billy Gibbons up at Pete's house of ZZ Top. I did some work on the Hogzillas that were part of the Kedzilla deal back when ZZ Top had that going on. I worked on those and I kind of just was able to work on some really cool stuff as I got along because I kept pushing, and it just kind of kept going. I mean, I was on a mission from the very beginning. I was on a mission. I was going to be good at this, and I probably cut my own throat. A lot of people don't know who I am because I never signed my work. It was a good and a bad thing. And I did it because all these guys that were my heroes, Glenn would come out and he was doing work and we had Bill Carter and Tom Stratton and all these guys that were out here that I knew would see my stuff. I didn't want them to see my stuff until I thought I was ready. And I know a lot of people, they're all about, figuring their signature out before they ever figure out how to make a brush work. And me, I didn't put my name on anything. Even though I was doing dealer work and I was getting pretty good at it, I didn't ever put my name on things. So here am I in my shop. I got a shop going on. I got stuff going out like crazy with no name on it. Because by then it would just, if somebody goes, put your name on it, I might sneak it in there. But for the most part, I didn't do it. The shop thing was great. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. But I was able to do what I did. People come in and just do what you do. But I was more into coming up with like graphic designs and and things like that. I wanted something that nobody else was doing. And I was always trying to push my own style. So it was more graphic design than just a typical pinstriping. And I was practicing my lettering. I'd got Signcraft magazine, and it's like, guys, there's these amazingly talented lettering guys that, again, they're now friends of mine, and it's crazy that that they know me. If you're watching all the guys that are really, really good, it can't help but rub off on you, right? I always wanted to be the dumb guy in the group, which was pretty easy actually. But I always figured if I surrounded myself with smart people, I would always learn something. So the shop, I had to close the shop down in it was like 92, into 91, the economy crashed and everything just stopped. Phone quit ringing. And it was like, this is bad. And I was doing everything I could and it just stopped. So now I'm back at home working in the garage. So I don't have the overhead, and I'm working on a few jobs, and the phone rings. Is this Brad? Yeah, this is Brad. Brad, this is Dick Vale. Well, if you're in Southern California, you knew who Dick Vale was. He goes, I need you to come by and do this job. Okay, well, how'd you hear about me? I got your number from Bob Bowder. I did a paint job for Bob, said I got to find somebody, and he told me to call you. So, wow, okay. As that's going on, I'd been going down to Pomona and going by a custom painter named Tom Stratton's shop, who his whole thing was race cars. He painted dragsters and funny cars, and that was pretty much his forte. He was just a race car guy. He didn't do street cars. It was strictly race stuff. I wanted to go to work for this guy so bad, so I kept bugging him, and I'd show him pictures, and he'd had the best of this working for him over the years. Tom Clark had been down there, and Martin CC, and Glenn Weisgerber, and John Pugh. I mean, it was the cream of the crop that had worked with this guy. Brenda had been down there, and I was just this dumb kid trying to figure out how to keep pushing and get his foot in the door. So he finally goes, okay, come on by, you can work on Dick LaHaye's car. It's like, okay. So I went down there and pinstriped and lettered this guy that was this top fuel icon at the time. And then I worked on another car and another car. Pretty soon I'm painting decals and I'm doing the stuff that the other guys had done, but now I'm able to put my name on the list of guys that had worked down there. In the meantime, I started doing work for Dick Vale. And he and I had hit it off. We actually became pretty good friends. We had a lot of fun down there. And then through him, I met other people. So I started down there, and the first week I'm down there working, I met Chip Foose, and he came by and introduced himself. We're right next door, and so I got to know all the guys at Boyd's, and then everything just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger because of this Bob Bowder thing. So then, Bob would introduce me to somebody else. So now I'm doing this all from one guy. One guy has now pretty much made my life go the direction it has gone, and I knew this. I met Dennis Rickless back then, about the time I met Chip, and Dennis was a huge, I'd seen his stuff in Hot Rod magazine, and he did a lot of really cool flame jobs. And then Dennis and I got to be friends, so we tag team on all sorts of stuff. And I worked with Mr. Vale for about 15 years. We had a lot of fun working together. He was stubborn. We butted heads a few times. You're supposed to go someplace like do what you're asked to do, and it's like, no, I'm Brad. I'm Brad of America. I don't do that. I'm supposed to do that. You're supposed to just do whatever you're told to do, but sometimes if I didn't agree, and it wasn't like very often. Most of the time, it's like, that's what I'm thinking. What do you think? I'm thinking this. It's like, all right, that'll work. Or we meet in the middle. How about this? Why don't we do this and this and this? Oh, okay. And so we would both be happy. So you told me he wasn't a big fan of your footwear when you went down there, because we know how you dress, obviously. But he was mad that I started showing up wearing flip-flops, and he's like, well, my guys want to wear flip-flops, and I need you to start wearing shoes. And I went, then you should hire somebody that wears better footwear than I do, because I'm not changing my shoes to come down here. And I stuck to my guns. It's like, if you want to hire somebody else striped with leather because they wear tennis shoes, knock yourself out. I'll come down here barefooted. I don't care. So you had two guys kind of battling it out, and he made sure he'd walk by and dump Coke on my feet, or he'd step on my toes, or he'd throw things at my, he was brutal, but we had a lot of fun, and all this, we worked together until like 2008. And then stuff would happen in the middle, like in the mid 90s, Dennis had called me and said, hey, I got this job. I need you to come down and look at it. I want you to do this job with me. All right, what is it? Just come down here. So I go in there, and it's like this huge building. And it's like, what are they, one of these bikes going, well, these are kind of cool. What are they doing? And Schwinn was reintroducing the Black Phantom bicycles, which were kind of huge. That was kind of a big deal at the time. He did 3,800 of those Schwinns. And I did a ton of them. And when Dick Vale died in 2008, it's like, wow, what am I going to do? Because that was such a huge part of my life. I hated the drive. It was an 80-mile drive each way going to Orange County. But I was in the middle of greatness. I was like, what am I going to do? And then I get a phone call. This is Brad. Yeah, this is Billy B. Hey. And we met a couple of times. He goes, I got a couple of jobs that Dick had painted down here, and I think you did the lettering and the striping on them. I said, okay. He goes, I'm having to redo part of the paintwork. I need you to come down and redo what you did. I was like, all right, no big deal. So I went down there, and it was closer. It was an upland, so it wasn't near the drive. Like, well, this is easy. I can do this. So I ran down there and started doing work for him, and kept doing boats, and just kind of kept my feet in the water doing that stuff. Now, somewhere, I don't know, we're going backwards or forwards here. Obviously, the Dick Vale thing became the Billy B thing, and you were talking about doing artwork. Yeah, okay, I kind of got ahead of myself here. So while I was working at Vale's, I was also, one of the other things I was doing, I wanted to, because again, I'm that guy that sets dumb goals for myself. And I had seen this guy named Greg Tedder, who was kind of like the t-shirt guy. He did a lot of race shirts. He was quite amazing. I want to do t-shirt art. And I didn't know if I wanted to do it as a regular gig, but it's like, I'm going to figure this out. And, painting is one thing, but putting artwork together to make a screen, to put colors in the areas that you want them, to make them fade, that's a whole different animal. I'm going to figure this out. So I started doing t-shirt artwork, and I did did some for friends of mine, and I slowly went, I'm gonna do this. And so I was doing t-shirt artwork and then shirts, started doing shirts for people where I was at here. And I was like, this is kind of cool, because now it's a challenge. Well, the more I did, the more I went, okay, now these guys are there's other artists out there, and the artwork is getting really, really good, and I'm chasing my tail here. I can do okay, but these guys are phenomenal, and I don't know what they're doing. And it had gone to the computer. So some people think that, it's a computer, you push the button. Yeah, no. You still have to create it. It's still hours and hours and hours of time-consuming. You still have to draw. You still have to make it happen. It doesn't just happen by accident. The computer is just a tool. Instead of having a pen and a knife cutting out, ruby lith over a light table, you now are sitting in front of a computer screen putting colors together. And I started doing a lot of artwork, and I was doing artwork for people all over the world. I had stuff going to Australia and Canada and all over the U.S. I had stuff kind of going everywhere. And I had a lot of fun with it, except it was so time-consuming, and it was so much work. But I was getting burnt out on the doing the shirt artwork. I'd done it for a while now, and it's like, I need a break. I went back to pinstriping because I needed to make money, and just kind of got back on it, and since I still had my foot in that door, it wasn't really that hard to go get back in the middle of it. So I took off and got back in the middle of it, and started doing work with Dennis again. Dennis and I started tag teaming on some projects, and we were doing big rig stuff. He ended up working with this guy Mickey down in Pomona, and they were doing it was like prototype stuff. That was Freightliner and Western Star were doing. That were going to the Mid-America Truck Show, so it was stuff that people hadn't seen yet. And we did a lot of projects together, and Dennis paid me probably the ultimate compliment, and at least for me, hearing it from him. We walked in one day, and we were working on one of the truck deals, and it was kind of funny. Our biggest decision for that day, we'd walk in before we even did it. We'd walk in, decide where we're going to go get lunch. That was our biggest decision for the day. We didn't know what we had to do, but where are we going to eat lunch today? Oh, I don't know. So we'd figure that out, and then we'd go work on what we're going to work on. I asked him, I said, how many guys have you asked to work with you? And he goes, just you. And I go, what do you mean just me? He goes, the only guy I've ever asked to come do work with me. I said, we worked on a lot of projects over the years. He goes, oh yeah, I mean like lots, some really cool things. And I go, why me? You know, what do I have? And he goes, we can walk in, look at a job. It doesn't matter what it is. I can go, we got to do that. I don't have to be here. I can get in my car and leave and go do something else. It's going to get done like it needs to be done. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to come back and double check your work. Which, wow, pretty awesome compliment to get from
wow,
from one of my guys.
That's pretty dang cool.
That was pretty cool.
I know we're kind of hitting and missing here. I know the linear part of the story isn't going quite like I thought it would go, and probably not like you thought it would go. But there was another project you had going on besides the striping and lettering and the t-shirt artwork.
I was at the store one day, and these guys were looking at Auto Trader magazine. They're going, man, there's nothing in this desert for Auto Trader stuff. It's all LA. It's all LA, Orange County. It's all down there. And I went, why is there no Auto Trader magazine in this desert? Maybe there should be. So me, being the smart guy that I am, knowing absolutely nothing about publishing or distribution or even how to get your foot in the door, decided I was going to start a high-des version of Auto Trader. And I did. And I sold all the ad space, and I took all the photos, and I put the pages together. And I started this, and I went, this is insane for one guy. This is nuts. So one of the places I hit up to see if they wanted to advertise in it, she'd already messed around publishing a little bit, Suzanne. And I said, will you help me? If you help me lay this thing out, then you guys can have the back cover. So Suzanne and I decided to put together a magazine. So I took all the photos, put the ads together, and did all the artwork. And I gave her all the stuff, all the pictures, the dealership advertising, and she laid everything out and made pages out of it. I'd drive to Riverside every other week, and I would pick up the magazines and I would deliver them. I was delivering 10,000 issues every 2 weeks. I had 130 locations where you get them. You got them for free. I didn't charge for them because I was selling advertising. I thought I can keep this thing going just by selling advertising. I want these things out. This needs to be a form of advertising, and maybe this will work. And people loved it. Problem is, it didn't make me any money. Kind of seems to be a theme with me. But I tried for 2 years, and I worked, and I don't even like talking about it because I cried. I actually sat down and cried when I finally pulled the trigger on it, and that was all done. And it's like I can't do it anymore. I'm balancing money that doesn't exist, and I'm gonna go in debt, and I'm never gonna be able to pay this back. I don't even know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be in trouble. So I had to shut it down. And I was more upset. It's like, man, I love the magazine. I guess I love the advertising in there. It's like there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough for me to try to take care of my kids and keep a magazine afloat, even though I'm working 100 hours a week. It was ridiculous. I worked. All I did was work, and it wasn't all bad. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it.
You truly are a glutton for punishment. Truly.
wow. And then, yeah, I know this is kind of, I know it's kind of dumb, but my font. So again, being that guy that has to try everything, I had to, when I was doing shirt artwork, I was buying fonts. You know, in the sign world, that's a bad word because it's a computer generated word. You know, instead of lettering styles, it's fonts. So it was a company called Letterhead Fonts, and they had some really high end guys on there doing some amazing work. I emailed the guy and I went, "What does it take to get a font in here? What are you going to do?" He goes, "Well, if you have something, let me see it." So I lettered up our office door, done this flame thing on it, and did my ragged bread. And I'd lettered, and it was a style I'd come up with back in the 90s, just out of boredom, just this ragged looking lettering. And there was a couple of versions, but they weren't doing what I was doing. I just kind of made this thing up. And I send him a picture. I email him a picture. It's 15 minutes later, he sends me his phone and goes, "Call me. You have a whole alphabet of that?" I go, "Yeah, and numbers and everything else." He goes, "I'm going to send you a sheet, and this is what we need, you know, for characters." And most people think an alphabet, that, you know, it's 26 letters and you get numbers and, you know, 10 numbers, and it's like, no, there's like 87 characters that are made for a font. It's like dumb. So I made it all up, and now if you go online, go on Letterhead Fonts, you can find Ragged Brad. Just type in Ragged Brad, you can find Ragged Brad.
If you had any projects that really stand out in your mind, that really you just go, "Wow, that was kind of cool to be involved in." Obviously, you've worked on a lot of different projects, but is there anything that's really stood out that you're really proud of working on?
Dennis calls me and he goes, "Hey, Chip told me to give you a call. We got to work on this project at Disneyland." I go, "What?" He goes, "They're building a thing called Cars Land down at California Adventure. We got to do a bunch of striping on it, you know, down at the park. You want to be part of that?" And I went, "What? Duh. To work at Disneyland? That's kind of cool, yeah." And so we get ready to go. It's like, "Hey, we're going to meet down there on Thursday." We'll say it's a Thursday. And bring all your paint stuff. So I get this old beater paint box I'd had for 30 years. This piece of crap. At least I thought it was. And I get down there, and I was kind of embarrassed because I knew Dennis would have his nice little clean little setup, and Jeff's gonna have his nice little setup, and I get this piece of crap old paint box that I've used for 30 years. I get down there, and we start working, and we're in one of the ride areas, and there's all these Imagineer guys walking by the hard hats. They're working on the ride, and I'm not there. We're not there for 20 minutes, and Dennis comes over and he goes, all the Imagineer guys keep coming by and they're taking pictures of your paint box." And I go, "What?" "I mean, he goes, "They're taking pictures. They're talking about your paint box." He goes, "A whole bunch of them come by." And I go, "Okay." It just sounded dumb. Like, why would they give a crap about an old paint box? About 15 minutes later, Chip comes over and goes, "Kathy wants to know if you want to sell your paint box." And I go, "What? What?" And he goes, "They're all over there talking about your paint box. A bunch of the Imagineers and Kathy, and she was the one in charge of this whole project. They want to know if you want to sell the paint box." What? Yesterday, I'm still embarrassed to bring this thing down, and now everybody's talking about it while it's down there, which was just a little weird for me. And toward the end there, one of the trips down there, John Lasser, the director of Cars, comes down. He brings his group of kids, and he's giving them a tour of the thing. And Chip brings him under and introduces him to me, and goes, "This is Brad." He goes, "Hey." He goes, "Oh, he's the one with the paint box. That's yours?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You need to sell that to us. You need to work out something with Kathy." "Why?" He goes, "That's really, really cool. We have to have that." So Chip goes, "You need to put a little crown on that thing and write Ramon. It's got to have Ramon on there. Ramon has this little signature." So it's got the little crown on Ramon, and it's now part of the racers ride. And so the Disneyland thing was probably the coolest thing I was ever involved in, and Disney bought my paint box.
So now we're at Stories in Steel, and this is weird because this whole interview is a little strange because I've always been good at talking to myself. It's when you start answering is when you know you have a problem. So we're sitting here doing an episode of Stories in Steel, and we're going to talk about the beginning of Stories in Steel. A friend of mine, a social media friend of mine, we were talking, and he had, we kind of became friends, and Steve goes, I always wanted to do a TV show about going to car shows and going to people's shop and checking out what they're building and different things like that. And I go, okay. And so we talked about it some more, and it's like, all right, why don't we try this? So we had another friend of his, and he was going to do the filming, and we went to a few places and tried to kind of do it, and it didn't go like I thought it should go. I wasn't sure what Steve was thinking, but I knew what I envisioned. And when these guys started talking, I realized the story was way cooler than what the car was or what the event was. And it's like, it needs to be like this. And since it didn't work out with Steve like we had hoped, and it was one of those, I just kept thinking about it, going, I got to do this. I need to make this happen. Because now I got the bug. I got to figure out how to make this thing work. And so I went, okay, I got to get some equipment. I need to study cinematography. I need to study sound and lighting. And then I got to figure out editing. I mean, there's a lot I need to figure out. This is a lot of work. So I had done work for some camera guys to work in the studios. And I called my friend Scotty and I go, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? And he goes, that'd be kind of cool. I go, what am I doing? How am I going about this? I was already into photography. I did photography in high school, and I was already into that. And thought, how can I make this really cool? So he bounces some things off me, and I go, okay. So then we go to lighting, and I knew a guy that up here from the desert. He'd raced sprint cars forever, and he was the lead lighting guy on 2.5 Men and Mom. And I called him up and said, Mikey, I need your help. And he goes, okay, do this. I don't have $1 zillion. I got $12. He goes, okay, do this. So I made it work with what I had. It's like, okay, I gotta get a couple of cameras and get those figured out and figure out how to do this. And I got some great help with helping get those and people that want to be involved in this. And it's like, okay, this has got to keep moving forward. I got to figure this out. Well, now I came into the editing and I was lost. And so I put out an ad in the Recycler. I need help with editing. And a bunch of guys, they were doing little cheesy YouTube videos, and it's like, no, I need to find somebody that gets it. And this guy was doing commercials, and he lived up here, and he reached out, and we became friends. And I ended up, trying to help him the best I could with what I knew, and he walked me through with what I needed to learn, and got me just enough to get in trouble. Went on YouTube a few times trying to figure out things because I wasn't sure, and got some books and studied that, and found some books online and studied those, and then with the sound thing, it was the same kind of deal. A friend of mine was doing transportation, and he goes, come down to Sony Studios, and I'll introduce you to the sound guy for this one project that we're working on. So I went down there, and he goes, that's what you need to do. I said, okay. Now it's a matter of putting episodes together. Well, I know everybody, and I knew that I knew everybody. So I started making phone calls. Hey, I want to do a story on you. I want to do a story on you. I want to do a story on you. And it just kind of kept going. And it's like, well, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. And it's like, okay, this is really good. And my initial goal, it wasn't YouTube. We had it on Amazon Prime for a while, and they quit streaming. They decided it wasn't money in it for them to pay out for streaming, so that pulled the plug on that deal. And now it's on YouTube. But my goal was always something more mainstream. I wanted something like Discovery or History Channel. That was my goal. It's still my goal. It's not a documentary. We'll call it a biography. People are telling the stories. How did you become who you are? And where did you start? What was the beginning of this? Was was it your family? And then they would finally get to how they became the masters of their craft. And that was the whole idea of Stories in Steel. My life has not gone the direction I thought it was going to go.
and it's for the good. It's actually kind of an amazing deal. I got a new partner in this mess of a life of mine, and I've been able to hang up my brushes and just focus on filming. And I got an agent, so now we'll see if we can take this thing and I can get my dream, my goal of mainstream TV to do something with this. And I still have a never-ending list of guests I want to talk to all over the world. I want to go everywhere, and that's my goal, is to go everywhere and make something truly magical that people can enjoy and maybe learn something from.
You left out another, and I know it's a passion, that something you feel very strongly about, and you don't do it probably as often as you'd like, but we haven't talked about that at all. And it's not filming, it's not painting, it's not even building cars, but there's something else. And you did it. You were doing stuff back years ago, and it kind of came to an end. So let's talk about that for a minute.
The unknown passion of Brad here. So I've always been a diehard race nut. I didn't care about driving. I was always turned on by the mechanical end of things, because there's so much. There's all these little things, and I've hung out with different guys over the years that were just complete lunatics that looked at it from that way. It wasn't a let's go out and have fun. Let's go out and obliterate the competition, which that to me is fun. You know, if we're going to go out and do it, let's go out and do it. And even some guys now, a friend of mine now that was the first guy to go 100 mile an hour on a skateboard. Did it because he's a complete lunatic, and he's all about the mechanical end of things and what it takes to get there. Every little tiny scenario you cover, and I've been part of that. When my youngest daughter was younger, we were racing, and I built a dyno. I actually built a small engine dyno, an inertia dyno, and I had a flow bench, and I played inside the rule book. What rules I was given, I played with, and I gray aerated the crap out of that thing, which is fun to me. I don't want to cheat, but if it's not written down, I am running with it. She did roundy round dirt track stuff, and then we got into the go-karts, into pavement stuff, and it's kind of the same time I had my magazine going on, and I just flat ran out of money, and it came to a screeching halt. But the passion for racing never stopped. And I was always a huge fan of drag racing and land speed racing, because it was like a car show. I wanted to find something that there really wasn't a rule book other than the engine size, the fuel, and everything else is geared around safety. I want to do something that I have no rules with. I'm going to build a streamliner. So I sat down and I designed a streamliner. And it wasn't about the driving, I just wanted the hats. First, I wanted to be in the 200 mile an hour club, which is a red hat. Well, if I'm going to get a red hat, I want a blue hat. There are a lot of guys got red hats. I want a blue hat. I want to be in the smaller club. Well, if I'm going to be in the smaller club, I want a black hat. This is ridiculous. I want all three hats. And fortunately, I know a lot of really smart people. And so I sat down and drew a car all up, kind of sketched it up, knew the kind of envelope I needed to fit myself into because I knew the guy whose records I needed to go after. A friend of mine was at the house one day, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to figure out how to build this race car, because where do you build a streamliner? You can't build it in a 2-car garage." And he goes, "Why don't you bring it over to the shop?" So I went over to Mike Harper's shop, the guy that I met back in the Pete Shaporis and Bob Bowder days, and where they built the shocks. He had a big shop next to the Hesperia Airport. And he goes, "I'll just give you a corner over there. You set up your table and you go to work." I was like, "Okay." He goes, "I'll kick in the money for electricity or whatever. You're out of the way. It's not like I'm not even using that part of the shop." "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, knock yourself out." "Okay," because I'm doing this on a budget. So I proceeded to glue together a bunch of tubing and bent everything all up, and got help from a couple friends of mine, because I didn't know how to bend it up the way I knew how I wanted it, but I didn't know how to get there. "I need your help." So they bent this is what I need. They got it for me, and I notched everything, put stuff, tacked it all up, and then paid a friend of mine to do all the finish welding. And I have this spectacular race car chassis that's not very far from being done. And I was running out of money. I was like out of money pretty much. So the Stories in Steel thing, I figured if I can get Stories in Steel going, that'll help pay for my racing habit. So now that's definitely my goal. It's in my container right now, and it's sitting there just waiting for me going, Dad, it's like, I know, and I hate it because I've always the guy that finished this project. If I started something, I finished it. I hate having an unfinished project. That's just one of my pet peeves. If I start building something, start working on something, I gotta finish it. And I've had other guys going, I want to drive it. You can drive it. I don't care. Anybody can drive it. If they want to help with this whole project, I don't care who drives it. I just want the hats. All the records get obliterated after I do it. I don't care. I just got my hats. If it's a car that I'm involved in that's got my name on it going in the record book, that's just as cool. I don't have to have the driver's name. I don't have to be part of that. So the driving is irrelevant. The mechanical aspect, that's what turns me on the most. That's probably my biggest passion in life, is racing. And why I never chased that, I don't know. But that's still a huge goal that I need to check off my list.
Thank you for sitting down and doing this. Thank you for letting me talk to myself and not look too weird doing it. Instead of trying to introduce all the crew members on Stories in Steel, we figured it would be easier to show our audience a picture of us in action, and we turned it into a poster. Click on the link to purchase the complete set of 1.